Welcome to the Page Turnerz Podcast, where book lovers unite to celebrate the enchanting world of fiction. With your host, Paul A. Brooks. In each episode, we'll dive into the captivating realms of storytelling, exploring the pages that transport us to magical places and introduce us to unforgettable characters. In each episode, we'll embark on a creative expedition through the minds of seasoned and emerging writers to unravel the mysteries and unveil the passion that fuels their stories. Join us on this odyssey through the pages and pixels of imagination, where words become worlds and stories illuminate our lives. So, pour yourself a coffee and immerse yourself in discussions about writing, gripping plots, heroes and villains, and the sheer joy of escaping into a well-crafted story.
Today I'm talking to Katherine Kempf, author of the Mimameid Trilogy. Educated in the US and in London, today she lives in Germany with her husband and young daughter, and I wanted to find out how she finds time to write and whether or not her degree in anthropology influenced the stories that she writes. Hi Katherine, thank you very much for coming today. I mean, it's great to meet you. I know we've been messaging back and forth for a while to kind of arrange a time to get together. Am I right? You're in Germany, is that right?
I am, yeah.
Wow, okay. So you're
I'm American. I spent some time in the UK and then I met my husband and now I'm in Germany.
Right, okay. So I was going to say, it sounds to me like you've traveled the 7 seas going from one
No,
country
just
to
the
the next.
one back and forth a lot.
That's fantastic. So before we dive into talking about your book and what you've got coming up and all that sort of stuff, I want to talk a little bit about you. First of all, your kind of journey up to kind of where you are now as a writer. So the simplest question really is, have you always been a writer? Can you kind of fill in the blanks?
Yeah, I think like most people, I was writing when I was a child, or most people that end up in our profession. I was writing as a child and I was writing in, really ridiculous little notebooks in middle school and hiding them under my covers at night so that I could get some more writing in after my homework and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Yeah. But always having like 3 or 4 stuffed in your backpack with different ideas. But I think I really started taking it seriously first in college when I was taking some classes and then attempted my first sort of full-length feature a little bit after that. And it's evolved into what is now my first book. And that I sort of started in earnest, I would say, about 2018. Maybe 2019 is when I sat down. I got laid off, which actually turned out to be the best thing ever because I had a bunch of time. And my husband said, instead of trying to start something new, why don't you work on something that you already have your heart behind anyway? Yeah. So I started sitting down and actually devoting some time to the book, and the rest is history, I guess, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely, and more from the future to come. So that's so your book then. And I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly. I know we've already spoken. You've told me what it really is, but yeah, I will get to that in a moment. But is it the genre that it's in? Is it young adult? Is it dystopian sci-fi? Is it Norse mythology?
Yeah, so it started out a little bit YA, and then as I started writing it, I think that my natural style sort of just evolved into something that was a little bit more mature, which was fine with me. Yeah. But I definitely, since it's my debut novel, definitely in rereading it, can see where the YA aspects still sort of drop in a little bit, the things that didn't really get written out of the first draft that are still there. Yeah. But yeah, it is geared more towards adults.
Okay, so I mean, does it span across a number of, well, I say a number, so the 2 or 3 different genres then? So Can you say there's a real sci-fi element to it? Because I mean, when you talk about and explain to your book about your book, it's going to be interesting to see where the sci-fi elements are in there. Yeah. So that makes you've got dystopian sci-fi, myths and legends, Norse mythology. A little bit of young adult in there, but now it's a little bit more mature. My goodness. Yeah. So it has evolved quite a lot, which is
good. It has.
Yeah. So and talking about how it sort of kind of evolved into what it is now, when you first drafted it and when you reread it, did you look at it and think, oh, actually, I really need to change it quite a lot? Was there a big rewrite?
I actually recently saw a quote from Neil Gaiman, which I think was very accurate. He said he was asked the question, "What's the difference between the first draft and the final draft?" And he said, "A great question. I think basically everything is the same except for what's important."
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think that holds up very true. It has a lot of elements that are the same. Obviously, there's certain plot beats that are still there and such, but so much evolved, so much changed from the first draft to the second to the final draft, that it's hard to put my finger on what exactly is original and what's not.
Yeah, sure. Is it longer than you wrote originally, or is it?
For sure.
Do you know what it is? Funnily enough, I mean, I've read Stephen King's book on writing. I don't know if you've read it, but he says that your second draft is your first draft minus 10%. So he kind of shrinks it down, but it never happens for me when I do it.
No, it doesn't happen for me either.
Yeah, there's that little bit of a bit more detail of the scene that can go in there that will kind of sense all that sort of stuff. So with that in mind, then, and thinking more about your writing style, are you a plotter or a pantser? And I ask everybody.
I want so hard to be a plotter. I try. But I think there's an aspect of spontaneity that has to be in there for me in order for my creative juices to keep working. Yeah. I definitely do like an overarching plot, and I try and get certain scenes in, but inevitably every time scenes come in that just feel really organic and need to be there. And whether or not they make it to the final draft is another question. Maybe they're just there for me to explore a little bit of a side character or something, but I can't really, when I try and plot myself out like that, I end up just boxing myself in. And so I have to be flexible when I'm drafting. I definitely lean more towards the pantser, but obviously I need a little bit of structure too. Otherwise, who knows?
Yeah, I think everyone's the same. A lot of people I've spoken to fall in the same categories as I'm very much a pantser, or like, I might have some bullet points of kind of main things that I want to get in there, but I'm very much write by the seat of my pants. Do you find, and have you ever found that when you're writing a scene, it goes off in a completely different direction than you think?
Yes, and it's usually so beautiful. Like whether or not it makes it into the final scene, you have this it's that moment where you really hit your magic, and you have to keep going with it regardless of whether it's important or not. It's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant. And have you ever found that some of your side characters, as you put it, have become sort of main characters, or sort of have a larger part in your stories, or do they still remain very much small? Because one of mine was almost a bit part, really, if you like, and now he's the savior of the world. So it really grew. And again, like you're saying, that was organic. That never, it wasn't really an idea that I had, but it just kind of grew. So do you have something similar, a side character that's got bigger?
I don't know if I have one that's gotten quite to that level where they're the savior of the world.
Big extreme, but
I only have one book out, so there's definitely room for that. However, I definitely have side characters that take on much larger personalities than I originally had planned for them, and you get so into writing that personality that it just sort of erupts on the page a little bit. I definitely have that. And I'm right now in drafting the second book. I am also exploring a lot more of these side characters. And so I'm doing short stories about them. And it's really fun to get to know their back histories and to get to know why they make their decisions. And so I'm really enjoying that aspect too. So who knows what'll happen, really.
Do you, in terms of your writing software, then, thinking about sort of having files for side characters and their backstory, do you use Scrivener or something like that?
Yeah.
Scrivener, you do?
I do use Scrivener, and I used Atticus for my format.
I do too.
And I didn't in the first book use Pro Writing Aid, but I have that on my back burner for the next book that I'm going to do it, because I think one of the aspects that I didn't even consider is the readability score they talk about. And so being able to use that that aspect of pro-writing aid and other certain things with adverbs and whatnot. I'm really looking forward to testing that software out too. So, but yeah, I'm a big fan of Scrivener.
Yeah, I think I'm just too simple there because I just write in Google Docs effectively, but I use Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly kind of as I'm going along. Sometimes they're in conflict. It's really strange how that happens.
Oh man.
But yeah, so yeah, at which point I just make it up, but you can as a writer, that's part of the job, isn't it, really? So yeah, so that's what we do. But okay, so you're also, before we start talking about your book, because I do want to talk, I'm going to get you to talk quite a bit about your book, but you're an anthropologist, is that right?
Yeah, that's what I studied. I did, my program was very heavily cultural anthropology based, which I think was what initially attracted me to it. Right. I kind of have only figured that out in the last couple of years of my life, that's just kind of, my brain works like that. And that's what attracted me to it in the first place. I ended up going more into a forensic anthropology direction for my senior thesis. And I did a work study in Greece, excavating ancient infant remains, very, very old, like 2,000 or 3,000 year old infant remains from little clay pots. And that was very interesting. That's what I wrote my thesis on, which was about the concept of personhood and how we define what a person is, and how that hasn't actually changed very much from ancient times to today.
Right.
But we obviously are working with different factors than the ancients were. So I've always kind of had this thread tugging at me in the back of my mind, but that's where I started, and didn't really realize how that was influencing my work today until reviews started rolling in, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, your book is really revolves around Norse mythology. Norse mythology, that's hard to say.
It's hard to
Norse
say.
mythology. Yeah. So I'm assuming then your background in anthropology had a bearing on the choice of the subject, or is it just a kind of a natural interest that you had for that particular culture anyway?
It's actually neither.
Okay.
I wasn't really into mythology. I kind of stumbled upon it. My original idea for the book was sort of, it was like a culture that venerates and surrounded by seals, like some sort of northern culture where seals are kind of like the lifeblood of the culture. Okay. And the very little of that remains in the book, but that was where it kind of that's where the conception stage was. And right. I just built it off of that.
Fantastic. So, well, that's really interesting, isn't it? When you have a seed of an idea like that, and then all of a sudden it's just not anywhere written at all. That's quite amazing. So
the only little detail is that they still have sealskin rugs in Mimameid if you live in the higher levels. Yeah. And that's really the only aspect that remains of it, which is quite interesting, like you said.
Yeah, I'll say so. Mimameid. My goodness, all right, kind of almost got it right. So that's based on Norse. I'm going to say it again. Norse mythology. I've got to say that really slowly. Norse mythology. I still get it wrong. Norse mythology. Now, Mimameid means Mimi's tree. Is that something?
Yeah, exactly.
Norse.
Mm-hmm.
And
because
good, I was going to say because
go ahead.
I was going to say you've got your cover with you, haven't you, for your book?
Yeah.
So because there is the tree of life on there, is that so? That is then I'm assuming there it is, yeah. And that's really lovely. And so I'm kind of assuming that is sort of a depiction of the title that kind of goes with it. And that's really good. So the book itself is would you say is it a story of survival? The survival of Ragnarok.
Yeah, so Ragnarok is it's an event in the past, but not so far in the past. And at the beginning of the book, our first protagonist, my male protagonist, has never heard that this event was referred to as Ragnarok, but he comes across this sort of cult-like group that
Lysander, is it?
Lysander, exactly. Lysander is the one that for them it was just an apocalypse. For any of us, we wouldn't see what was happening like that and refer to it as Ragnarok unless we were hardcore pagan mythologists still today. So yeah, so for him it was just a regular old apocalypse, and but he comes across this group of soldiers, and they take him to this place where they refer to this apocalypse event as Ragnarok, and then we sort of get dragged into the Norse mythology aspect of that, and how it's kind of being used in the same way that other religions are today as a way to control people.
Right. Well, that's fascinating because it's when you think about what's going on globally in the world now with climate change and global warming, you could almost sort of say that it's happening again. And one of your reviewers actually said that you created a chillingly realistic post-apocalyptic world. So I'm thinking, my goodness, with the way the world's going at the moment, it could certainly head in that general direction. What I liked on your website, and so there will be links to your website somewhere around this video. There is a teaser video that's on there that kind of goes over the story just a little bit, which is a great video. I really like it. Would you kind of go over a little bit more in a little bit more detail of the story without giving too much away?
Do my best.
Yeah, I like to put you on the spot, but go
on. So you mean the video, or do you mean the story itself?
The story itself, yeah, the book.
So as I said, our main character Lysander has spent the last several years traipsing around Scandinavia with his companions Magdalena and Linnea, who's a mother and a daughter. That he met at one of these refugee camps, and the refugee camps are sort of they're an overflow of what happened really before Ragnarok, is when in my vision of the future, all of our governments dissolved after resources became so scarce we couldn't get along anymore. Flooding takes over most of Central Europe and Northern Europe, and certainly other parts of the world as well. But since that's where it's set.
Well, that's not happening, is it?
No, definitely not.
Sorry, carry on.
So he was studying in Central Europe, was kicked out of the country for not being from that country, sent back to Scandinavia, and en route, Ragnarok happened, and his boat gets overturned, and he washes up on the shores of his homeland, but to a vastly different homeland than he left. It's no longer the civilized place that he had his family in. So he's on a hunt for his family, finds out that they were in fact killed. But it's a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not they were killed by the invading Celts, or whether or not they were killed during the flooding, or just disease in the camps or whatever. There's no explanation in the first book, at least. But in finding his family, he stumbles upon Magdalena and Linnea and is given sort of a new purpose. And that's something that's a theme for Lysander throughout the entire trilogy, is trying to find his place in the world, trying to find his purpose.
That's fantastic.
And so that leads them to these soldiers that find them later on, the beginning of the book, but later on in their timeline, and take them to this mysterious bunker where the survivors of Ragnarok have, or at least the Norse survivors of Ragnarok, have been hiding out from, as I said, the barbaric Celtic invaders, which I think has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way at the beginning. But I promise that it's not as black and white as it seems.
No, that's really good. That's brilliant. When is it? I mean, you mentioned earlier on that it was in the past. Whenabouts in the past is it set?
You mean
the story?
Like exact date? I don't have an exact
to the day.
So I think our story takes place about 8 years after Ragnarok.
Okay, that's good. The video on it is narrated by, I'm assuming not you.
No.
Who you got it? Because she's got a very it's sort of Scandinavian accent that goes with it.
That's what I was going for. So my female main character is Finnish. She's from northern Finland. And I wanted something in that vein, and I actually did find a Finnish friend. She's an older friend from when I was a kid, and she was happy to narrate it. So so it's a Finnish woman.
That's fantastic. I love her pronunciation of Ragnarok. I won't even
Yes, me
attempt
too.
it, but yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's really good. So you kind of you can get the feeling of that the culture and the sort of geography from her voice, which is really nice
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
And so, would you then consider maybe an audio book?
Absolutely. I wanted to start it actually at the end of last year, but certain things came up and I wasn't able to go down that road.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm hoping to this year. I'm hoping to get that taken care of this year. I would really love to do that.
And would you use the same person who you used for your video to perhaps do it?
I actually hadn't considered that. She'd have to do a lot of male voices, so I'd have to check with her if that would be something she's interested in. But I was actually looking at a male narrator. He said, because that's my preference, but I actually have no idea. Maybe I should poll people and figure out whether they prefer a female narrator or a male narrator.
Well, it's funny because in my book, Altered Evolution, certainly the first one in the trilogy, it is written from a female perspective. So I mean, I don't have the audiobook done yet. I'm hoping to, like yourself. But it should, I mean, should it be a female? I think so. But again, like you, it could also be a male as well. But so it would be a matter of finding the right actor for it.
Yeah, it's very important. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few people that I've spoken to who have had audiobooks done, and they've what's the word? Not interviewed, cast it. Not when you do casting, you're testing different people, and then there are some companies out there that do it as well. So I think it's a fantastic idea to do, especially if you've got like you, and there are more books to come, because there's that really nice continuity, and it gives you a different medium to work in as well. And I think people really appreciate that sort of thing. So you've got this one done. What is it? Mimameid Solution.
Mimameid Solution.
Mimameid Solution. Talk about the second and the third book. Do the second book first, obviously. You're in the. Did you say you're already starting that? You're drafting that now?
I'm about 75% of the way through the first draft.
Okay.
I'm stalling on the gas a little bit for my last push, but yes.
So can you give us any snippets of that? Where is the story going?
Well, the story is it's about to get way bigger than anyone saw coming, including myself. I love it when that happens. It's the scale, the way that and this is probably very egotistical of me, but the way that I've been thinking about it is very Lord of the Ringsy, in that the Fellowship of the Ring is meant to set everything up for the next two books.
Right.
And it's a lot lighter. And you also spend a lot of time in the Shire, and you spend a lot of time just getting to know the culture of hobbits and all these kinds of little details that don't feel very relevant, but then come full circle in the Return of the King. So right now I'm working on my two towers, which means we got to have a lot of low points, and we've got to have a lot of conflict and a lot of things that aren't resolved. And so I think that's why I'm trying to give it everything I possibly can, so that I don't have this, I mean, they call it, the sophomore slump or whatever. I'm not worried about that. It'll be fine. But I'm trying to treat it like that.
Sure.
So I'm working on my Helm's Deep. Let's put it that way. That's where I am right now.
Okay. And the third one, how was it? I don't want you to give it away. I was just how it's going to end, but that would be a real spoiler. So the third part then, does it bring everything to a conclusion, or are you going to leave it with the possibility of additional stories, maybe short stories or a serial or something like that, to follow on towards the end? Because you know what people are like. Once they get invested in a story, they just don't want it to stop. So have you thought about the ending and potentially what's going to happen next?
Well, I certainly have thought about the ending, but it is at this point open-ended enough that things could go on. I don't plan to. I would like to keep it as a trilogy, but it could be that there are some side stories or an offshoot or something like that comes up. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But certainly, I feel like the time spent on certain characters will have come to a close by the end of the third book. And maybe other characters will take off in a different direction, but certainly some of those characters' stories will be concluded.
Yeah, well, I think that's important because again, people like, when loops are closed, so that there is a resolution. I think that's kind of an important thing to have. So once you finish this trilogy, then what's going to happen after that? Do you plan on writing in a different genre, or have you got other ideas for another story?
I don't have anything concrete, but I am really fascinated with space opera, and I think I would like to take my sci-fi to space at some point. So that's kind of where I'm thinking I'm going to go after the trilogy is over, just because it's an interesting offshoot of sci-fi because it takes place on Earth, and it's not an Earth that's like totally different from ours. It is in many ways, but it's still very similar to our Earth. And so I'd like to do a sci-fi that's just a totally different world, quite literally on a different planet.
Yeah, and get stuck into some real world building and all of that kind of stuff. That's good. So how do you find time to write then with a toddler? How old's your daughter?
My daughter's 2.5.
Okay, so she is very little. How do you find time and what's your writing routine then?
So I think that the first thing I have to just completely own up to is that I have a very supportive partner. He works all day, and then when he finishes working, he comes downstairs and takes care of our daughter because he works from home. And he gets up very early so that he's able to get off early so that he can give me the afternoon to work. So I have to give him credit where credit is due. I have a great buddy system that I'm working with here at home. My daughter is old enough now that I have been able to leave her alone in like a room for an hour or something and tell her, no, I'm working, or you can come in and sit with me, but you have to be quiet. And that allows me to do certain aspects, obviously not sitting down and actually writing, where you have to have quiet for that so that you can really get in the zone, or you have to be able to put music on and really just check out. But certain aspects that I can hack away at moments of the day when she's with me, so that when I have that dedicated time, that I can actually sit down and do the writing part of the job.
Yeah, the job itself. And so do you have any specific goals when you sit to do a writing time? So do you just write in sprints in terms of maybe thinking, right, I want to do 500 words or 1,000 words or something? Do you have that kind of structured goal in mind, or do you just keep going?
When I'm drafting, I absolutely do, because otherwise I would never get it done.
Yeah.
However, for me, the really long part of the process is editing. I love editing. I can edit for 5 years and it will never get done, but I love it. I must come with the anthropology thing. I don't know. But I really love the editing part of the process. So for me, that's where the creative aspects, I mean, obviously you have to be creative during the drafting process too, but really to get down to those finite details and to dig apart intentions and characters and each individual piece of dialogue, like all of that part, that those bits of editing are really exciting for me. So I tend to have less restraints on myself during editing. But again, it took me about 3 years to edit the last book, and I can't do that again. So I might have to impose some sort of rules on myself this go around.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I find the editing side of things tedious. When I switch on my critical mind, creativity just goes out of the window, and is enough. I just find it a little bit frustrating. I just feel like it squashes me just a little bit. But there are occasions though when you're reading through, and then you can think, another idea will pop in that is much better. Or if you're kind of like, if you're doing like a developmental edit side of things, when you're looking at the big picture, the big story, you can find real gaps and plug those, which is, I suppose, of course, that's the thing that's what it's for. So
it's also for me, it gives me a great sense of satisfaction to plug all those holes up.
yeah, absolutely. Do you have like a group of beta readers or ARC readers that you send your?
I don't really have a dedicated group. I have one good friend who's she's not professional or anything, but she's just a big reader and quite an analytical reader, and she's very good at giving me feedback on that. I also have some other, I obviously my main character is an engineer. So there are some technical aspects that always need to be checked over. And so I had, at least for the first book, I had an engineer that read over it. So little things like that. And it's always important to me. I also had a beta reader, as a deaf consultant, because I have a deaf character in my book. So I try and cover my bases in that regard. I have a male reader and I have a female reader, and I have people that are making sure. I also had a friend read it I have a Swedish friend who read it as well, for those Norse aspects. So just with certain goals in mind. But those were all very early versions of the book.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, it's always good to have those sort of things. I mean, some of the people that I've spoken, some of the writers, they will ask for if you, because we as writers, we grow a list of readers. I don't know about how often you email your list, but I email once or twice a month just to give people updates. But I always ask them, I'll send them a couple of versions of the cover that I'm thinking about, and ask for feedback, because the good thing about doing that really is then you're onto pretty much a guaranteed winner, because you ask what you prefer, which is good. Yes, I suppose like you, I have some readers, male and female, different ages, and sometimes also different interests as well. They don't necessarily, because I write in sci-fi, but they don't necessarily read sci-fi. But when you look at some of the reviews on mine on Amazon, they have said, this isn't my usual genre, but I really enjoyed this. So and that's really nice when that sort of things happen.
Yeah, that's great.
You mentioned you have a Swedish friend who read through. Based on the fact that it's on Norse mythology, would you have it translated? Is there a possibility?
So I have. So one of the, this conversation comes up a lot for me, because my husband's entire side of the family is German.
Right.
And so they would of course love to read it in their mother tongue, but our estimates for getting a translation have just independently is anywhere from about $20,000 to $30,000. So it's quite expensive.
Yeah.
I would love to have it translated into as many languages as possible, but it's quite a hefty job to take on. So it's not anything that we're looking at immediately, but it is a dream of mine. Let's put it that way. It is definitely something that I would love to do.
Yeah,
capital is there, and maybe that's something. Maybe if I can find the right translator, someone who is willing to work with us on another price point, then maybe it's something that I can consider doing as a Kickstarter or something like that.
Yeah, good idea.
It'd be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So when can we expect then? Maybe putting you on the spot a little bit. Book 2. When have you kind of got a rough idea of when you want to launch that?
I do, but I do not expect positive feedback for my answer. I have decided that it is best for the trilogy for me to draft back to back. So I'm going to be doing book 2, and book 3 back to back, and that in the first half of the year, hopefully. And in that regard, it's probably going to be 2025 before book 2 is out. But in that, because of that, I'll be able to do a rapid release. So I'll be able to do book 2 and book 3 relatively short, one after the other. Yeah. And consolatory prize is that I will be releasing some short stories this year. Hopefully the audiobook will be coming out and stuff like that. So I have other things in store while I'm working on drafting book 2 and book 3, but they are a little bit later down the pipeline.
No, that's all right. Because sometimes I think doing that short release, 2 and 3 quite close together is often a good thing. One of the people that I spoke to, Nick Snape, he released 7 books, pretty much one after the other, and it's done really well. I mean, it's a great series anyway. The Weapons of Choice series is excellent, but doing it that way has really given him a bit of a kick. So I would imagine for you as well, 2 and 3, that'll really kick off from there.
The momentum,
yeah, absolutely. Now you mentioned short stories. So what are you writing in terms of your short stories, and where are they published, or are you planning on publishing them, and where?
So I am still up in the air as to where I'm going to publish them. It kind of depends on how long they end up being as to where I publish them. It's possible that I'll be giving one away for free as an email giveaway. And then I also recently read one that a friend of mine released on Amazon, and I really loved actually reading it in that format. So I wouldn't, if I have a longer one, I might publish it on Amazon as just in the ebook format. Kind of depends on where they end up. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that. I found that one of the things that's really important for me as a writer for inspiration is travel, which sounds personally to me is like quite a elitist thing to be able to say that. I'm very lucky that I'm able to travel. But one in particular, I was sitting down trying to figure out which short story to begin with. And it brought me back to my time in the UK. And I took a week and I walked the Cornish coastal path down at the bottom there.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. It's such a magical, inspirational place to be. You're literally just like windswept. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Did it take you past Tintagel and all that? I
didn't make it up to Tintagel, but I would love to go back.
Yeah.
I did. I think I started in, oh gosh, it's been a few years, but I ended up at Lizard. So I did all of the south down there. Oh, St. Ives. We started in St. Ives and we went down to Lizard.
Wow, fantastic.
So, so that's a little bit of a spoiler, but that's where this current short story that I'm working on takes place.
So what are they about, the short stories?
Just various side characters. One of them I wrote, and it was a little spoilery, so I realized I couldn't set that one out yet. But this one is, and most of them I think will end up being actually backstory for a lot of characters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. How long are they going to be? I mean, short stories, what, 10, 15,000 words?
Yeah, I think at the moment they're kind of hovering around 10,000. But like I said, if I get really inspired by one, then it might take off and I'll do a little bit of a longer one. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, there's some of the people that I've spoken to, and myself included. I don't know if you've heard of Ream Stories, reamstories.com. It's kind of if you heard of Wattpad and Royal Road, where people will upload serials, it's the same.
Okay.
But it's built very much for writers by writers, so it's really good. Have a look at that. I mean, just going.
I actually someone that I follow on Substack at the moment is also doing a serial release on Substack, and that's I didn't initially think of something like that, but the serial, like you said, it's kind of coming back, and I really like that idea. It's kind of like your weekly release from Disney Plus or whatever, and you're watching every Wednesday. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, but people binge read as well as binge watch, obviously, but they binge read as well. A lot of people on somewhere like Wattpad or Royal Road, which is sort of the free for most people, you're probably aware. But they will just upload a couple of scenes or an entire chapter or something like that, and so you can do that 2 or 3 times a week, and all of a sudden you grow this huge readership who you can then introduce to your other work as well. So that's something that a lot of people do.
I think one of the other things that this particular author brought up was what she's releasing is a murder mystery, and by releasing it in a serial format, the readers get a chance to influence where the murder mystery is going to go.
Audience participation.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
So where can people buy your book right now? Because let's finish things off here at this point, because we've been talking quite some time, which is great. And that's but where can people buy your book right now?
So it's Amazon is, of course, that's the primary, I think the easiest place for people, the most accessible place for people to buy it on Amazon. I don't have it set up that you can buy it off of my website just because of German tax laws at the moment. I am in the process of changing my business so that I will be able to at some point, but at the moment Amazon is the legal way to do that. And then if you want the ebook, I think there are some other ways to get it through your local bookstores, but if you want a paperback or the ebook, it's easier on Amazon, I think, at the moment.
That's fantastic. Well, look, what I'll do is I'll put links to your website and maybe Instagram or something like that. People want to connect with you at that point in the descriptions for when this is on YouTube and Spotify and all that sort of stuff, so people can get hold of you. Of course, it'll be on Page Turnerz as well, so again, people can get in contact with you or get your book through there as well. So we'll do that. So listen, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been really lovely to speak to you. I'm fascinated for the Norse mythology, and that's quicker. So yeah, that would be really good. I'm going to dig into it a little bit more myself, and have a look. And then, once book 2 and 3 next year, 2025, when that's coming out, perhaps you'll come on and we'll talk more and go through those at that point.
Absolutely. This was really great. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. It's been lovely to speak to you. Thanks, Katherine. And I'll speak to you again soon.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on another captivating episode of the Page Turnerz Podcast. We hope you enjoyed delving into the pages with us, discovering new stories, and revisiting beloved classics. If you're as passionate about books as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback keeps us bringing you fascinating discussions, author interviews, and book recommendations. Remember, the adventure never ends when you have a book in hand. Until next time, keep turning those pages and let the magic of storytelling continue to inspire your imagination. Happy reading.